I was folding my favorite cardigan, the blue one with the pearly buttons, when my daughter Julia leaned against my bedroom doorframe with a smile too bright to be casual. "Mom," she said, "what do you think about a little trip? Just the two of us. You've been stuck in this house for too long." The suggestion caught me off guard. After my husband Jack passed away 3 years ago, I hadn't gone anywhere beyond the grocery store, church, or the doctor's office. The house had become my world. Quiet hallways, his books still on the shelves, his jacket still hanging by the door. "A trip?" I asked. "At my age?" She laughed. "You deserve it. The ocean, a little sunshine, fresh air, it'll be good for you." Her enthusiasm softened me. Julia had been busy with her marriage and work. Moments like these, when she spoke to me with the same tenderness she had as a girl, were rare. I nodded slowly. "All right, a few days won't hurt." By noon the next day, the sun poured down on the driveway, and I was double-checking every lock, every switch, every window. Old habits die hard. Julia followed behind, carrying her own bag and checking her phone every other second. "You worry too much," she teased. "I'm the one who keeps this house standing," I replied, pocketing my brass front door key. "Why don't you let me hold on to it?" she asked, too quickly. "In case the sitter needs." "I'll just set a code on the keypad," I said, slipping the key deeper into my pocket. "It's safer." Her smile wavered for a fraction of a second before she forced it back. "Of course, whatever makes you comfortable." We drove out with the windows cracked, Fleetwood Mac humming through the speakers, the kind of music Jack used to whistle while painting the porch. For a little while I let myself believe Julia's intentions were simple. A mother-daughter getaway. Time to reconnect. The hotel on the coast was beautiful, perched above the sea with glass walls that caught the sun. We checked in, ordered tea on the balcony, and laughed about nothing in particular. For a moment, I felt like life might be returning to normal. Then my phone buzzed. A notification from the Ring camera at my front door. Person detected. I opened the app. A man in a fluorescent vest left a package on the porch. I shook my head at myself. "It's just a delivery." Julia sipped her tea. "See? The world keeps spinning, Mom. You can relax." But that evening, as we sat at dinner, another notification appeared. Person detected. This time, when I tapped the screen, a man in a dark sport coat stood at my door, a leather folio in his hands. He pressed the bell, glanced at his watch, and then, oddly, pulled out what looked like a stamp pad. I froze. Julia noticed my expression. "What is it?" I turned the phone so she couldn't see. My voice came out tighter than I meant. Probably another delivery. But the truth was clear. This man wasn't delivering anything. He was waiting for someone to open the door. Later that night, while Julia showered, I checked the feed again. The same man lingered at the porch, and when the kitchen lights flicked on inside the house, he looked toward the window as if expecting someone. And then I saw him. Daniel. My son-in-law. He was standing in my kitchen, flipping through papers with the man beside him. He pointed to a line on the page, lips moving, his expression cold and businesslike. I clutched the phone until my hand trembled. Julia emerged from the bathroom, hair damp, wrapped in a towel. "You okay, Mom?" she asked. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I need to go home." The drive back from the coast felt endless, headlights carving through the black highway while my phone buzzed non-stop with Julia's calls. I ignored every one. Each vibration was another reminder of the betrayal playing out inside my home. I turned down my street a little after 1 a.m. Mrs. Patel's porch light was still on. She opened her door as soon as she saw me pull in. "Evelyn," she whispered, clutching her robe. "I thought you were gone." "I was," I said, stepping out of the car. "Tell me, did you see anyone here tonight?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Men in suits. Your son-in-law was with them. They carried briefcases, looked official. One of them even asked if you were home. I told them no." The sting in my chest deepened. "Thank you," I murmured. "Keep your phone close." I unlocked my front door. The brass key turned with a groan, almost like it resented what it was about to reveal. Inside, the air smelled of cologne and fresh ink. Papers littered my dining table, legal documents, property deeds, my name scrawled in handwriting that looked disturbingly like mine but wasn't. Footsteps creaked upstairs. I froze. Daniel's voice drifted down the hall. "Tomorrow it'll be done. Once the papers are filed, it's ours." My stomach churned. Julia's voice followed, faint and trembling. I don't want to do this anymore. She's my mother. You want a future, don't you? Daniel snapped. That house is our future. Don't get weak now. I pressed a hand against the wall, fighting the wave of anger rising in me. Slipping into the laundry room, I dialed Paul Henderson, the retired lawyer who'd been a friend of our family for decades. He answered groggily. Evelyn? It's the middle of the night. They're stealing my house, Paul, I whispered. Forged papers, a notary. Daniel's behind all of it. Listen to me, he said, his voice suddenly sharp. Don't confront them alone. Gather what you can. Tomorrow morning, we'll go straight to the courthouse and file an emergency petition. And Evelyn, don't sign a thing. Thank you, I breathed, clutching the phone like a lifeline. I slipped back into the hall. From the upstairs landing, I saw Julia sitting on the edge of her old bed, her face buried in her hands. Daniel towered over her, holding a stack of documents. She'll sign eventually, he muttered. And if she doesn't, we'll make it look like she already did. Julia whimpered. What if she finds out? She won't, Daniel said coldly, unless you open your mouth. I backed away, pulse pounding in my ears, but as I turned, the floorboard betrayed me with a sharp creak. Daniel stopped mid-sentence. His eyes darted toward the stairs. I held my phone tight, its screen glowing with the photos I'd just taken of the forged documents, evidence, proof of his betrayal. The next moment, he appeared at the top of the staircase, staring down at me with a smile that made my blood run cold. Well, well, he said softly. Looks like the old woman came home early. Daniel descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate, his smile too calm to be honest. You should have stayed at the coast, Evelyn, he said. We could have wrapped everything up by morning. I stood my ground in the hallway, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. What is this, Daniel? Forged deeds? My name copied like I'm already gone? He tilted his head. You're making it sound worse than it is. Think of it as transferring responsibility. Julia appeared behind him, her face blotchy from crying. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. Daniel shot her a look that silenced her instantly. Then he turned back to me. You're old, Evelyn. You shouldn't have to worry about mortgages, taxes, maintenance. Let me handle it. You'll live comfortably and Julia and I will build our future. By erasing me? My voice trembled with fury. Jack and I built this house with our bare hands. Every nail, every coat of paint, it belongs to us, not to you. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Money changes everything. Once the papers are filed, you won't have a say. I lifted my phone, showing him the glowing screen. I've recorded enough tonight to end this charade. For the first time, his smile faltered. He lunged toward me, but Julia screamed, throwing herself between us. Stop it, Daniel. The briefcase he carried spilled onto the floor, papers scattering across the rug. Amid them was a thick manila envelope with my name scribbled on the front. I snatched it before he could react. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. A full power of attorney granting Daniel control of my accounts, my medical decisions, my entire life. Attached was a photocopy of my ID and a signature meant to mimic mine. You were going to strip me of everything, I whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened. You don't get it. This is bigger than you. With this house, we can pay debts, invest, finally move up in the world. By selling my life out from under me? Julia's sobs echoed against the walls. Daniel, please, I can't do this anymore. She's my mother. His face hardened. Don't get weak on me now, we're in this together. No, she whispered, shaking her head. Not anymore. The weight of her words hung heavy in the room. Daniel turned on her, fury blazing in his eyes. You think you can walk away? You're nothing without me. I moved in front of Julia, holding the envelope like a shield. You'll never touch this house again. Before he could respond, a knock rattled the front door. Mrs. Patel's voice carried through the wood. Police are on their way. Daniel cursed under his breath. His gaze darted to the back of the house. Then, with a snarl, he shoved past us, slipping toward the kitchen. Julia clung to me. Mom, run, she whispered. But I stayed rooted, the envelope pressed to my chest, knowing this fight was far from over. The living room was a mess of scattered papers, broken trust, and heavy silence. Daniel's eyes darted between me and the manila envelope clutched against my chest. Julia sat on the couch, her face streaked with tears, whispering apologies I wasn't ready to hear. Daniel slammed his briefcase shut. You don't understand, Evelyn. This house is worth more than your memories. 8 million, maybe more. Developers are waiting. I've already lined up buyers. I stared at him. And you were going to sell it behind my back with forged signatures and lies? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. With opportunity. This place is just wood and brick. You can't take it with you when you're gone. Julia flinched at his words. Stop it, Daniel. She's not gone. She's right here, and she's my mother. His hand shot out, gripping her arm. You wanted a future, didn't you? This is it. Don't turn weak now. I shoved his arm away and pulled Julia to my side. You will not lay a hand on her again. Daniel's smile twisted, bitter and cruel. Without me, you both have nothing. You think anyone will believe a grieving widow over me? Before I could answer, a sharp knock rattled the front door. Mrs. Patel's voice carried through. Police are here. I've told them everything. Daniel cursed under his breath, his jaw tightening. Red and blue lights flickered through the curtains. The sound of car doors slamming echoed outside. Julia squeezed my hand. It's over, Mom. He can't hurt us anymore. But I shook my head. Not yet. Daniel grabbed his briefcase and strode toward the kitchen. You think flashing lights can stop me? He muttered. The officers called from the porch. Mrs. Carter, are you inside? Open the door. I opened it, relief flooding me at the sight of two uniformed men. But just as I stepped onto the porch to speak with them, a faint creak from the back of the house chilled me. Through the kitchen window, I saw movement. Daniel hadn't left. He was slipping out the back door, his shadow cutting across the garden I had planted with my husband years ago. Julia's voice shook beside me. He's still here. I tightened my grip on the envelope, my resolve hardening. Daniel might have escaped the front, but this wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The red and blue lights from the patrol cars painted my walls in dizzying flashes. Two officers stepped into the foyer, scanning the papers strewn across the dining table. Mrs. Carter? One asked. We received a call about an intruder. I held up the manila envelope. My son-in-law. He forged my signature, tried to transfer my house. He's still here. I saw him slip out the back door. The younger officer's hand went to his radio. The older one nodded. We'll search the yard. Stay inside with the door locked. They moved quickly toward the kitchen, flashlights cutting across the garden. Julia gripped my arm, trembling. Mom, if they catch him, what happens to me? Her voice cracked. He's still my husband, and I'm pregnant. The words stopped me cold. I turned to her. Pregnant? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't want you to know like this. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I let him handle things, he'd calm down. I was wrong. My heart broke again in a new way. I pressed her hands. You are not wrong for protecting your child, but you can't protect him by destroying me. She sobbed into my shoulder. Outside, voices shouted. A flashlight beam swept past the window, followed by the crash of someone stumbling through the bushes. Stop! Police! We both froze. Daniel's shadow streaked across the yard, his briefcase banging against his side as he sprinted for the gate. An officer lunged, but Daniel shoved him hard, sending the man sprawling. The second officer gave chase, yelling into his radio for backup. Mom, Julia whispered, eyes wide with panic. I tightened my grip on the envelope. He's running because he knows we have the truth. Minutes passed in silence until the older officer returned, breathless. He got away, but we'll put out a bulletin. With the documents you've kept and your testimony, we can hold him accountable. Julia slumped into a chair, face buried in her hands. I've ruined everything. I sat beside her, forcing calm into my voice. You haven't ruined me, and you won't ruin this house. We'll face him in court. Tomorrow morning I'll meet with my lawyer. This isn't over. Her sobs softened, though her shoulders still shook. As the officers filed their report and finally left, the house grew quiet again. Too quiet. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the wind rustling through the garden where Daniel had escaped. It all pressed down on me like a warning. I looked at the envelope in my lap, thick with lies and signatures that weren't mine. I looked at my daughter, curled up on the couch, clinging to hope and fear in equal measure. And I knew that before the sun rose, Daniel would already be planning his next move. Morning sunlight crept across the living room, but I hadn't slept. Julia dozed fitfully on the couch, her hand resting over her stomach, as if to shield the life inside. The envelope of forged documents sat on the coffee table, thick with its ugly truth. At 9 o'clock sharp, Paul Henderson knocked on the door. He looked older than I remembered. Silver hair, glasses perched low, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "Evelyn," he said, stepping inside, "show me what you've got." I handed him the envelope. He thumbed through the pages quickly, his frown deepening. "They've prepared everything. Power of attorney, deed transfers, even copies of your identification. If this had been filed this morning, the court would have provisionally recognized it. You'd have faced months of hell to undo it." Julia lowered her head. I didn't know he'd go that far. Paul's gaze softened only slightly before he returned to business. "We'll get this notarized and entered into the record. With your testimony, Evelyn, and the neighbors, we have enough to freeze any transfer attempts." I nodded. "Do it, whatever it takes." But before Paul could gather the papers, the front door rattled violently. Julia jerked awake. "Mom." The door swung open. Daniel stood there, his clothes rumpled, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched tight. He had come back. "You called the police on me?" he snarled. "You think you can destroy my life?" Paul rose calmly, tucking the documents under his arm. "Daniel Carter, you need to leave. The authorities will." Daniel cut him off, pointing a trembling finger. "Don't you touch those papers. They're mine." "They are not," I said firmly, stepping between him and the table. "They belong to me. This house belongs to me." He laughed bitterly. "You think the law will save you? Judges can be bought, papers can be filed. I'll get what I want." Julia stood, her voice trembling but stronger than the night before. "No, you won't. Not with me. Not anymore." For a moment, Daniel froze. His wife, his supposed ally, had just severed the tie. Rage overtook him. He lunged forward, reaching for the envelope under Paul's arm. Paul staggered back, holding it high. "Enough!" I shouted, grabbing Daniel's wrist. His strength shocked me, but I refused to let go. "You old fool," he hissed. "You're standing in the way of your own daughter's future." Julia's voice cracked through the chaos. "My future is not for sale." The front door banged again. This time it was the police, drawn back by Mrs. Patel's urgent call after she spotted Daniel storming inside. Officers burst through, ordering him to stand down. Daniel's eyes darted wildly. He released me and raised his hands, but his smirk remained. "You haven't won yet," he said softly, almost to himself. The officers cuffed him and led him out, his words echoing in my ears. I turned to Julia, who stood pale but resolute. For the first time in days, her eyes met mine without wavering, and I knew this battle wasn't finished, but the tide was beginning to turn. The house felt quieter after the police car pulled away with Daniel in the back seat, but the quiet didn't feel safe. It felt temporary, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Paul spread the papers across the dining table, his expression grim. "These forgeries are good. Too good. Whoever he hired knew what they were doing." He tapped the fake signature that mirrored mine almost perfectly. "A judge glancing quickly could have believed this was yours." Julia sat opposite him, wringing her hands. "What happens now?" Paul adjusted his glasses. "The police can hold him overnight, maybe longer depending on charges. But Daniel is right about one thing. If these documents had been filed first thing this morning, we'd be in for a legal battle that could drag on for months." I felt my stomach twist. "So even now, we're not safe." "Not yet," Paul admitted. "But we have the originals and proof of forgery. What we need is a witness who saw Daniel trying to push this through." Julia's head snapped up. "The notary, the man who came last night." "Exactly," Paul said. "If we can find him, if he's willing to testify that Daniel tried to pressure him into stamping fraudulent documents, the case will be ironclad." I nodded slowly. "So we track him down." That afternoon, while Paul made calls, Julia and I sat together in uneasy silence. She finally whispered, "Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness." I looked at her, my chest aching. "You let him twist you, but you're here now. That matters." Her eyes brimmed. "I thought he loved me. I thought he loved our baby. But he only saw me as a way to get to you." I reached across the table, taking her trembling hand. "Then love your child enough to choose better. To stand on the right side of this." Her grip tightened on mine. For the first time in days, I saw something new in her eyes. Not just guilt, but resolve. By evening, Paul returned with news. "I found him. The notary. His name's Mr. Collins. He admitted Daniel pressured him last night. He's shaken, but he's willing to meet with us tomorrow morning at the courthouse." Relief washed over me, but only for a moment. Julia frowned. "What if Daniel gets to him first?" Paul sighed. "That's the risk. Daniel's out on bail, and he'll use whatever time he has left. The air seemed to thicken around us. I could almost feel Daniel's presence, like his shadow stretched back into the house he so desperately wanted. Night fell. I sat awake in the living room, the envelope on the table in front of me. Julia slept upstairs, one hand still over her belly. The wind rattled the windows, and for a brief second I thought I heard footsteps outside. My pulse spiked. I rose, clutching the envelope, and peered through the curtain. Nothing but darkness, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel wasn't finished. Not yet. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and paper, a place where lives were rewritten in ink. I clutched the manila envelope to my chest as Paul guided Julia and me through the metal detectors. Julia walked slowly beside me, her hand over her stomach, pale but steady. Mr. Collins, the notary, waited for us in the lobby. His eyes darted nervously toward the doors every few seconds. He looked smaller than I remembered, as though guilt had shaved inches off him overnight. "Mrs. Carter," he said, voice low, "I shouldn't have gone along with him. He pressured me. He said it was just routine paperwork, that you'd already agreed. But when I saw your name on those forms, I knew." Paul nodded. "The important thing is that you're here now. You'll testify that Daniel tried to force you to notarize forged documents?" Collins swallowed hard. "Yes, I'll do the right thing." Before relief could settle, a sharp voice echoed across the lobby. "Do the right thing?" Daniel's tone dripped with venom. He strode through the courthouse doors, flanked by a lawyer in a dark suit, his eyes locked on Collins like a predator spotting prey. "Don't let this woman poison you," he sneered, jabbing a finger in my direction. "She's confused, senile. I'm the one protecting Julia and our child." Julia stiffened. "Protecting me? You tried to destroy my mother." Her voice cracked but carried through the hall. People turned their heads. The lawyer at Daniel's side placed a calming hand on his arm, whispering something, but Daniel shook him off. "You think you can win?" he hissed at me. "All of this, your recordings, your so-called witnesses, it won't matter. I have connections. I'll bury you in court." Paul stepped between us. "Not today. We're filing a motion to freeze all property transfers immediately. With Collins's statement, the judge will see through your scheme." Daniel's jaw clenched. His smile twisted into something darker. "You think one cowardly notary will save you?" Collins shrank back, his courage faltering under Daniel's glare. For a moment, I feared he'd bolt. I touched his sleeve gently. "You saw the truth," I told him. "Don't let him scare you into silence." Collins's eyes flicked from Daniel's fury to Julia's tears, then finally to me. He straightened his shoulders. "I'll testify," he said firmly. "I won't be part of your crime." Daniel's face darkened with rage. "You'll regret this." Two bailiffs stepped forward at the commotion, positioning themselves between Daniel and us. The lawyer finally dragged him back, hissing in his ear. But even as he retreated, Daniel's gaze lingered on me, burning with a promise. This fight wasn't finished. I clutched the envelope tighter. My legs shook, but I stood tall. For the first time, I felt the tide beginning to shift. Not because of papers or lawyers, but because the truth was finally stepping into the light. The courtroom was packed the following morning. The hum of whispered conversations filled the air, a mix of curiosity and judgment. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Paul beside me, Julia behind us. Her hands folded over her stomach, her face pale but determined. Across the aisle, Daniel adjusted his suit, a smug smile tugging at his lips. His lawyer whispered in his ear, handing him documents with neat tabs. He looked at me as though this was already won. The judge entered, and everyone rose. When we sat, Paul rose first. "Your Honor, we move to introduce evidence of forged deeds and a fraudulent power of attorney. We also present a witness willing to testify that the defendant attempted to pressure him into notarizing these documents." The judge gestured. "Proceed." Mr. Collins stepped forward, hands shaking slightly as he was sworn in. His voice cracked at first but grew steadier. "Daniel Carter approached me late at night. He insisted I notarize documents transferring his mother-in-law's house into his control. When I hesitated, he became aggressive. I refused. The documents presented to me bore a signature that did not belong to Mrs. Carter." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Daniel's lawyer jumped up. "Objection, this is hearsay." The judge frowned. "Overruled. The witness has first-hand knowledge." Daniel's jaw tightened. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering furiously. Paul rose again, holding up the manila envelope. Here are the very papers. Notice the inconsistencies in the signatures. And here, he clicked play on my phone, is the recording of Daniel himself declaring he would take the house whether she agreed or not. The audio echoed through the chamber, Daniel's voice cold and calculating. She'll sign eventually, or we'll make it look like she already did. The room erupted in gasps. The judge slammed his gavel. Order! Julia rose from her seat. Her voice trembled but carried across the room. Your Honor, I'm his wife. He told me the same thing, that my mother was old, that she didn't need the house. He pressured me to go along, but I can't, not anymore. Her words hung heavy in the air. Daniel spun around, glaring at her, betrayal flashing across his face. Julia, sit down. But she didn't. I won't lie for you again. The judge's expression hardened. He looked directly at Daniel. These are serious allegations backed by physical evidence, testimony, and recordings. Until this case is fully tried, all property transfers are frozen. And Mr. Carter, you will remain under custody. Daniel shot to his feet. This is a setup. She's senile. The notary's lying, and my wife. Enough, the judge barked. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Two bailiffs approached. Daniel's lawyer tried to calm him, but Daniel's fury boiled over. He slammed his fists on the table. This isn't the end, he roared. The bailiffs dragged him back, his words echoing like a storm cloud still looming overhead. I sat rigid in my chair, my heart racing, but for the first time I felt the scales tipping. Not in my favor alone, but in the favor of truth. The trial stretched on for weeks, but the outcome was never really in doubt. With the forged papers exposed, the notary's testimony secured, and Julia's voice finally on the side of truth, Daniel's defense crumbled. On the final day, the judge's words rang through the courtroom. The deeds are fraudulent, the power of attorney invalid. Property rights remain with Mrs. Evelyn Carter. Furthermore, Daniel Carter is guilty of attempted fraud and coercion. I closed my eyes as the gavel struck. For the first time in months, my lungs filled freely. Daniel was led away in handcuffs, his fury silenced by the weight of the verdict. Julia sat beside me, tears slipping down her cheeks, not of grief this time, but of release. Mom, she whispered, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I took her hand. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened, but it gives us a chance to build again. She nodded, her palm pressed protectively over her stomach. I'll do better, for my child, for you. Weeks later, the house no longer felt haunted. The papers were locked in Paul's office, the case closed. Mrs. Patel brought over a pie and hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. You stood taller than the storm, she said warmly. Julia moved back in for a while, helping me tend the hydrangeas out front. Each morning I found her humming softly, hands busy in the soil, trying to mend what had been broken. And each night we talked. Really talked about the past, the choices we made, and the road forward. The house Jack and I built stood firm, not just as a structure of wood and brick, but as proof that love, perseverance, and truth could withstand even the ugliest betrayal. As I watched the sunset from the porch one evening, Julia sat beside me, her hands slipped into mine, and for once we didn't need words. We had survived. And this home, our home, was finally safe again. The seasons turned. The hydrangeas in the front yard bloomed again, their colors brighter than I remembered. Julia and I tended them together every morning, side by side, our hands in the same soil. Inside the house, sunlight streamed through the windows Jack once cleaned with such care. His memory no longer felt like a weight of grief, but like a steady hand resting on my shoulder. Julia's laughter began to return in pieces. Hesitant at first, then freer, like the sound of wind chimes in summer. Sometimes she paused, pressing a hand to her growing belly, and I saw hope flicker in her eyes. One evening, as we sat on the porch, she leaned against me. Mom, she whispered, I thought I'd lost you forever. You never lost me, I said softly. You only lost your way, but you found it again. She smiled through her tears, and for once, the house felt whole. Not because the walls were safe or the deed secured, but because love had returned to it. And as the sun dipped low, casting the house in golden light, I realized that betrayal hadn't been the end of our story. It had only been the beginning of a new one.